Hi, this is Roy Mitchell. We've made a couple of videos on the Science GSE, and this is my third video from that. In the last two videos, we discussed how the new science standards embrace what's called three-dimensional learning, where the core ideas of Earth, life, and physical science merge with the cross-cutting concepts and science and engineering practices. Now, these science and engineering practices are our new standards, and you can see them down at the bottom here. Uh, though we may cover the same topics as the old standards, the GPS, the verbs and the student learning targets promote more engagement with the GSE, the new standards. So, how do you go from knowledge of the three dimensions to applying that mindset to your classroom? Well, maybe what I can say here will help. Often teaching three-dimensional science is described with the 5 E's in this order. Notice where student engagement is in this order. I dare say that many old traditional lessons probably began with explaining, and some form of elaboration and engagement and exploration came between the teacher explaining and the evaluation at the end. But that's not the case with the three-dimensional mindset, the mindset of these new standards. The 3D method endorses student engagement before the teacher explains, engagement before explanation. So students get a chance to reason through and discover at first, rather than just working with an explanation that they are told. I heard somebody recently compare this mindset to the letters ABC, action before content. And I sometimes think of it also as active thinking before content. And that's exactly what you have here. You have the active thinking before you actually have the content being presented. And I think that's a pretty good way to remember the mindset of the new standards. So, why don't I take you through the steps of a 3D science unit? Remember the 5 E's started with engage and explore? Let's start with those. In the 5 E's, you can get initial engagement and exploration by the use of a phenomenon. You may remember in the second video, we talked a lot about a phenomenon. That a phenomenon is not only a hook that evokes questions and curiosity from the students, but the phenomenon also serves as an application to your content. A good phenomenon leads students into gathering, reasoning, and communicating before they are presented any content. Kind of a side note here. A phenomenon that is hands-on is not always possible, but it is preferable. So, for example, students dropping golf balls and measuring how high they bounce is certainly better than students watching a video of other students dropping a golf ball and measuring how high they bounce. So, on to the other E's. Explain, elaborate, and evaluate. You may recall that students' performance is based upon these 8 science and engineering standards. And you may recall us looking at standards and seeing that almost every standard, kindergarten through high school, had to do with these 8. Your explanation of any given concept may be the same from the old standards to the new standards, but what is expected of the students, you can see here, is different. Students describing or listing, as you might get in the old standards, is not the same as students making a model or analyzing and interpreting data. You must gear the students toward the new goals. All standards have communication in them inherently because of this last one. Obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information is the head standard of all the substandards in everything that we have K through 12. So, can you teach Georgia Standards of Excellence Science the same way you taught GPS science? While some of your previous methods of teaching and communicating may still be effective, the goals are different. List and explain are not the same as construct an argument and make a model. And because of that, doing the same old is simply not going to be effective if you have different student goals. So don't just do the same old. Gear toward that new student goal, even though you may use some of the same teaching techniques or communicating. Remember, you're looking toward that new student goal. Some more notes on these final 3 E's: explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Student engagement is not discouraged once you get past the engage part. Just happens to be the order that the 5 E's have. You are definitely not discouraged to having student engagement after you explain. I'm sure there's a myriad of labs and hands-on activities that you could then put in there. And you could even have another phenomena that you have once you have a little bit of explanation that kind of helped apply to the first phenomena. It's definitely not discouraged. It's not discouraged to have a engaged student engagement in this part. Later on in the unit, you can have labs or actions that reinforce or add to the student's understanding in meeting the new standard. This brings us to the cross-cutting concepts below. About anything you study in science will involve a few of these concepts. To provide a framework for future learning, it's good for science teachers to use the language of these concepts. If primary, elementary, middle, and high school teachers point out these concepts whenever they are come across in class, the idea of doing this provides some continuity from years to years. Now, all cross-cutting concepts are not going to be used for all units. As you look at them, you can probably tell that you'll probably have a lot of patterns. You probably have a lot of cause and effect, but you might not have as much as, say, structure and function, and depending upon what you're studying, energy and matter, scale, proportion, and quantity. So when you prepare for a unit, using backwards design, looking at the standard first, you not only identify your student outcomes at that point, but you also identify what cross-cutting concepts probably apply to whatever is being taught. And at that point, you write them down, and as it comes through in class, you make sure to use these language of the structure and function, stability and change, and whatever happens to be in that particular unit that you see. So, I hope you can take the 5E concept, this 5E concept. Hope you can take this and see how you can better grasp the new standards and how they can apply to your classroom. And maybe the ABC, action or active thinking before content, can make that point maybe a little bit easier to remember. Well, I hope this has been fruitful for you.